I work as a bartender in a place that thrives on controlled chaos. It's a bar and restaurant hybrid in a bustling suburb just outside Baltimore, and it's got a unique, if slightly inefficient setup. There are no waiters, just us bartenders, and the cooks in the back. If you want anything, a burger, a Coke, a craft beer, you have to come to the bar to order it. When the food's ready, we yell your name, and you come grab it from the counter. I'm not sure what management genius came up with it, but my guess is it was a way to avoid hiring a proper waitstaff. Either way, it means my nights are a blur of constant motion, which I actually prefer. I think I'd lose my mind from boredom in a place with long lulls between customers. For whatever reason, the place is wildly popular. I personally don't think the food is anything to write home about, but the atmosphere is always electric. The music is great, the crowd is buzzing, and there's a standing area near the DJ booth where people dance and mingle. The constant flow of new people and the high-energy vibe make an 8-hour shift fly by. I love the brief, fleeting connections you make with strangers over the bar, so the gig is perfect for me. That particular night started like any other weekend. I knew it was going to be slammed and I was ready for it. By 9 p.m., the bar was filling up with a younger college-aged crowd. That meant more dancing, more spilled drinks, and a rowdier environment in general. It also, unfortunately, meant worse tips, but that was the trade-off. One group of kids was particularly relentless, ordering round after round of tequila shots, faster than I could line up the salt and lime wedges. It's always a special kind of chaos when they take over the bar. One guy, his eyes already glassy, used the same cheesy pickup line on me 3 separate times in an hour. I was running around, a machine of muscle memory, when I noticed an elderly couple walk in and sit down at the booth in the far corner of the restaurant. At first glance, there was nothing particularly strange about them. They were just old. It struck me as odd that 2 people their age would choose to spend their evening in a place as loud and chaotic as this. But it took all of 2 seconds for my attention to be pulled away by another drink order. Fast forward maybe an hour. The bar was at its peak, a cacophony of shouting and bass-heavy music. I was halfway through pouring a line of gin and tonics when my eyes drifted back to that corner booth. My hands kept working, but my brain snagged on the image. Something was wrong. That's when it hit me. They were just sitting there, motionless. They hadn't come to the bar to order anything. There was no food on their table, no drinks, not even glasses of water. I would have remembered serving them. Their age alone would have made them stand out. I looked closer, squinting through the dim, pulsing lights. They weren't even looking at each other. They weren't talking. They were both staring, with a fixed and vacant intensity, at the blank wood-paneled wall to their right. It was the strangest, most unsettling thing I had ever seen. My curiosity was a sharp, insistent itch, but the bar was slammed. I had a dozen orders to fill. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were waiting for someone else to join them. Maybe they were new to the place and didn't understand that they had to order at the bar. When I finally got a momentary break in the chaos, I decided to check on them. Wiping my hands on my apron, I walked over to their table, plastering on my most polite customer service smile. As I approached, a chill snaked its way up my spine. Neither of them turned to face me. They didn't even seem to register my presence. They were like statues, their gazes locked on that unremarkable patch of wall. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the small pocket of silence that seemed to surround their booth. "Can I get you folks anything to eat or drink?" The woman didn't flinch. Her head didn't move a millimeter. She kept staring at the wall as if I hadn't spoken at all, as if I didn't even exist. The man, however, turned his head. He moved with an agonizing slowness, a creaking, deliberate motion that seemed utterly unnatural, like a rusty machine grinding into action. When his face came into full view, I felt a jolt of real fear. His skin was the color of old parchment, pale and waxy, and stretched tight over his skull. His eyes were the worst part. They were dark and sunken so deep into his face that it looked like hollow pits. He didn't speak. He just stared at me, his expression completely blank, and gave a single firm, silent shake of his head. There was something in his look, a profound and ancient emptiness, that made my stomach twist into a cold, hard knot. I muttered something incoherent. "Okay, well, just let me know," and quickly retreated to the relative safety of my bar. I had the weirdest feeling in my gut. Those people, they looked like they didn't belong in this century, let alone in this bar. They felt like a glitch in reality. I tried to put them out of my mind, busying myself with wiping down the counter, restocking glasses, anything to avoid looking in their direction. But their presence was like a magnetic pole, constantly pulling at my attention. Eventually, when things started to die down a little as the night wore on, my curiosity got the better of me. I remembered the couple, and I glanced over impulsively, nearly dropped the glass I was polishing. Both of them were now staring directly at me. Their heads were turned, their bodies still perfectly rigid, their empty eyes fixed on mine from across the room. I made direct eye contact with the woman. Her gaze was unwavering, a heavy, suffocating pressure. She didn't blink, she just stared. I don't think I've ever been more uncomfortable in my entire life. A primal fear, cold and sharp, prickled at the back of my neck. I looked away immediately, pretending to be intensely focused on a non-existent spot on the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt like prey. By the time I gathered the courage to glance back again, the booth was empty. They were gone. A wave of relief, so powerful it almost made me dizzy, washed over me. I was just glad they were gone. As mean as that sounds, by the end of the night, as I wiped down the last of the sticky tables and closed up with my co-worker, Karen, the memory of the couple still clung to me like a bad smell. Karen is what you'd call a lifer. She's been working at this bar for over a decade and prides herself on noticing everything and everyone that comes through the doors. She has a photographic memory for faces and outfits. "Hey Karen," I started, trying to sound casual. "Did you see that weird old couple in the corner booth earlier tonight?" She gave me a confused look, her brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? What couple?" "You know," I insisted, "the elderly couple. They were sitting over there for like an hour, just staring at the wall. Super creepy." She shook her head, a definitive no-nonsense motion. "Nope, don't remember seeing anyone like that. And trust me, I would have old folks stick out like a sore thumb in here." She then jokingly asked if I was hallucinating, which got a small, forced laugh out of me. But on the inside I was panicking. I knew what I had seen. I was certain of it. "You sure?" I pressed. "They were right there." She crossed her arms, a look of mild annoyance on her face. "Listen, I can tell you that the girl in the red dress at table 5 ordered 3 vodka sodas. The guy in the Orioles hat tipped me $1 on a $60 tab, and that loud group of kids spilled at least 4 drinks. I did not see an old couple." She patted my arm. "Long night. You're probably just tired." I laughed again, complimenting her memory, but my mind was reeling. By the time we locked up and I was walking to my car in the mostly empty parking lot, I was seriously starting to doubt my own sanity. Did I imagine them? Was the stress of the night getting to me? As I fumbled for my keys, a flicker of movement across the street caught my eye. My blood ran cold. I froze, my keys halfway to the lock. Across the street, standing under the solitary, buzzing glow of a lone streetlight, were 2 dark figures, still silent. I couldn't make out their faces from this distance, but I didn't need to. I knew with a certainty that defied all logic that it was them. They were watching me. I wanted to scream, but the sound was trapped in my throat, a choked, silent gasp. I didn't wait another second. I ripped my car door open, threw myself inside, and locked the doors, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I jammed the key in the ignition and sped out of the parking lot without another look, my tires squealing on the asphalt. The drive home was a 10-minute trip that felt like an eternity. I was trying not to have a complete breakdown, repeating "oh my God" over and over like a prayer. Had Karen somehow missed them? Were they even real? Was I actually going insane? The story should end there. It should be a creepy, unresolved anecdote I tell at parties. I wish that's what it was. I never saw them at the bar again. Life returned to normal, but the memory left a scar on my psyche. About a month later, I was cleaning out my late grandmother's house. In an old, dusty photo album, I found a picture from the 1950s. It was a wedding photo, and standing off to the side, as guests, were 2 familiar faces, a man with sunken eyes and a woman with a blank, unwavering stare. It was them, exactly as I had seen them. Underneath the photo, my grandmother's cursive handwriting identified them. Mr. and Mrs. Abernathy died in the fire, 1958. The fire. The local library's archives told the rest of the story. A massive fire had destroyed several buildings downtown in 1958. It had started in a small diner, a diner that used to stand on the exact spot where my bar is now located. It had been sitting in the corner booth when the fire broke out. They never made it out. They weren't there waiting for a waiter. They were waiting for the fire. And now, I have a new fear. Every time I walk into work, I feel their eyes on me. I know they're there, even when I can't see them. And I can't help but wonder if one night, they won't be staring at the wall. They'll be staring at me. And this time, when they shake their head no, it won't be a refusal for a drink. It will be a warning. I don't have what you'd call an exciting life, but it's mine, and it's comfortable. I'm 40 years old, single, no kids. To some, that might sound like a recipe for a lonely existence. But honestly, I cherish the quiet sovereignty of it. I have a steady job, a modest house in the middle of a packed neighborhood, and the glorious freedom of answering to no one but myself. I work as a bartender, but not at some local watering hole. My stage is a high-end luxury rooftop bar in a neighboring town, the kind of place that caters to a clientele who consider regular bars to be beneath them. The zip code where I work is a world away from where I live. My little house is a solid 20-minute drive from the glittering towers and manicured streets of that other life, but the commute is worth it. The tips are phenomenal. People with deep pockets aren't shy about showing their appreciation, and a good night can feel like winning a small lottery. The rotating crowd also keeps things from getting stale. Since the bar is so upscale and expensive, we don't have the typical regulars you'd find in a dive. New faces every night, new stories, new fleeting connections. I like it that way. I've never been comfortable with the overfamiliarity some customers try to build with their bartenders. I like to keep a professional distance, a clean line between work and self. Maybe that's just me. My name, by the way, is Kevin. That will become important. It was a Friday night, our busiest. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of self-important conversations. The place was packed, a sea of silk shirts and designer dresses. Groups of friends clinked glasses, their laughter sharp and bright. Couples, on date nights, leaned in close, creating intimate bubbles in the crowd. And there were always a few lone wolves, people who probably wandered in just to feel like they belonged. I have a little mental game I play on nights like this. I try to spot the fakers, the ones pretending to be something they're not. You can tell a lot about a person by the way they order a drink. The ones who stumble over the name of a complex cocktail are usually trying to impress someone. The ones who order a whiskey neat, with a quiet resignation in their eyes. They've had a day. I had my eye on a couple at the far end of the bar, their wine glasses perilously close to empty. The key to great tips is anticipation. I was in my groove, a whirlwind of motion, shaking, stirring, pouring, my hands moving with the fluid economy of long practice. I was chatting with a customer about the merits of a particular single malt scotch when I noticed someone walk in who immediately broke the pattern. He didn't fit at all. I clocked him the second he stepped off the elevator. He was a storm cloud in a room full of sunshine. His teeth were clenched so tightly I could see the muscles in his jaw bulge, and his face was set in a scowl of pure, undiluted fury. He had a messy shock of jet black hair that looked like it had been styled by a hurricane. He wore a plain black hoodie under a faded, cracked leather jacket that looked like it had seen better decades. There were dark, indeterminate stains on the lapels, but none of that was as unsettling as the raw anger radiating from him. He made a beeline for the bar, moving with a predator's purpose. He didn't take a seat, just stood there, about 10 feet away, staring directly at me. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I wondered how he'd even gotten past the doorman in the lobby who was usually meticulous about the dress code. I cleared my throat, forcing my professional mask back into place. "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. He didn't answer right away. He just kept glaring, his eyes burning with an intensity that felt deeply personal. It was like he was sizing me up for a coffin. Finally, he muttered, his voice a low growl, "Double-shot Jigger." I nodded, trying not to show my surprise. We almost never poured Jägermeister. Our patrons leaned towards aged whiskies and artisanal gins. But if someone wanted Jäger, they got Jäger. I grabbed a shot glass, my movements suddenly feeling stiff and clumsy, and poured the dark, syrupy liquid. I set the glass down in front of him on the marble countertop. I turned to serve another patron, hoping he would just drink it and leave. But when I came back to charge him, he tossed a wad of crumpled, damp-looking cash onto the bar. Another red flag. 99% of our transactions were on credit cards. I rang him up, the silence stretching between us, thick and heavy. I was about to move on, to escape the oppressive weight of his presence, when he spoke again, his voice low and menacing. I will remember his exact words until the day I die. "I knew I'd find you here, Kevin." I froze, the glass in my hand forgotten. My eyes snapped to his. A dozen frantic questions exploded in my mind. How did he know my name? I don't wear a nap. I scrambled to connect his face to a memory, any memory, but there was nothing. He was a complete stranger. "How do you know my name?" I demanded, my voice a low hiss. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I needed him to know he had crossed the line. He just smirked a cruel, humorless twist of his lips. He ignored my question. "I know what you did," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was more terrifying than a shout. Before I could ask him what the hell he meant, he downed the shot in one violent motion, slammed the glass on the counter, turned, and walked towards the elevators without a backward glance. I wanted to yell, to chase after him, to demand an explanation, but I was on the clock. I couldn't just abandon my post. I just stood there, completely thrown, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was utterly, profoundly confused. I replayed the encounter over and over in my head. "I know what you did. What did I do? I'm no saint. I've cut people off in traffic, had arguments, maybe held a grudge or two, but I couldn't think of anything at all, that would warrant that level of cryptic menace. I don't make enemies. It's not in my nature." The encounter soured the rest of my night, casting a pall over the glittering facade of the bar. When my shift finally ended, the drive home was a blur. My mind was a hamster wheel, endlessly running over the same ground. Who was he? What did he think I did? By the time I finally pulled into my driveway and went to bed, I was still unsettled. But I chalked it up to a bizarre one-off encounter with a random lunatic. Sometime deep in the night, I woke up. It wasn't a sound or a dream that woke me. It was a feeling, a primal sense of wrongness. I hadn't needed to use the bathroom, and I'm a heavy sleeper. I lay perfectly still, my eyes open, listening to the familiar silence of my house, but the silence felt different. It felt occupied. My eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness, the faint moonlight from the window gradually revealing the shapes of my bedroom furniture, the dresser, the chair with clothes draped over it, and something else. In the corner of my room by the door was a dark mass, a shape that didn't belong. It was tall and still, a column of blackness denser than the surrounding shadows. It was just standing there, watching me. An adrenaline rush of pure, undiluted fear flooded my system, cold and electric. It felt like my heart had stopped and then restarted at triple speed. I forced myself to stay absolutely still, to regulate my breathing, to pretend I was still asleep. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Someone is in my room. The thought repeated itself, a frantic mantra in the screaming silence of my mind. He thought I was asleep. He was waiting. For what? For me to turn over, for the right moment. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just lie here and wait for the inevitable. I counted silently to 3, a desperate prayer under my breath. On 3, I exploded out of bed, letting out a raw, guttural scream that tore from my lungs. I was ready for a fight, ready for pain, ready for anything. But the figure didn't come toward me. The second I moved, it bolted for the door. As it scrambled out of my room, I heard something metallic clatter to the hardwood floor. I didn't hesitate. I chased after him, my bare feet pounding on the floorboards. I followed the sound of his frantic retreat through my house. By the time I reached the living room, the front door was wide open, swinging gently on its hinges, letting in the cold night air. Whoever it was, they were gone. I wanted to run out into the yard to see where he went, but a sudden, chilling thought stopped me. What if he wasn't running away? What if he was waiting for me outside, walking into a trap? I slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt, my hand shaking so violently I could barely grasp the knob. My whole body was trembling. Then I remembered the sound, the clatter in my bedroom. I walked back on unsteady legs, my mind reeling. I flicked on the light, flooding the room with a harsh, unforgiving glare. And there, in the corner where the figure had stood, glinting under the light, was a knife, a large chef's knife, one of mine, taken from the butcher block in my kitchen. The sight made me feel sick to my stomach. This wasn't a random burglary. Whoever I had just chased out of my house hadn't been there to steal my TV. He was planning to use that knife on me while I slept. I called the police immediately. They arrived quickly, searched the house and the yard, but found nothing, no sign of the intruder. I gave them a description of the man from the bar and they promised to get the security footage. The most disturbing part came when the officers were finishing their report. "We've checked all the windows and doors, Mr. Nolan," one of them said. "No signs of forced entry. Are you sure you're locked up tonight?" "I'm positive," I said, my voice hollow. "I lock my doors every single night. It's a ritual." They never figured out how he got in. They never found the man. The weeks that followed were a waking nightmare. Every creak of the house made me jump. I barely slept. I considered moving, but I didn't know where I would be safe. Then, about a month after the incident, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. My name, Kevin, was written on the front in a messy, angry scrawl. Inside was a single, folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of a driver's license. The picture showed a man I'd never seen before, with a different last name, but his first name was Kevin. And underneath the photo, someone had scrawled a single, chilling sentence in red ink. "Wrong one. Your next." And tucked into the fold of the paper was a spare key to my front door. Breakups are a special kind of hell, even the good ones, even when you know logically that it's for the best. The heart has a stubborn way of refusing to listen to the brain. My relationship with Liam had lasted 2.5 years, a significant chunk of my young life, and its end felt like an amputation. There was no screaming match, no throne plates, no dramatic betrayal. It was quieter, sadder, a slow, creeping realization that the path we were on together had diverged so gradually we hadn't noticed until we were shouting across a canyon. We just weren't right for each other anymore. But that neat, clinical explanation did nothing to staunch the bleeding. Some days the ache was a dull, constant throb. On others it was a sharp, stabbing pain triggered by a song on the radio or the scent of a specific brand of coffee. Everything, it seemed, was a ghost of him. I'd been militant about the no-contact rule, a self-prescribed regimen of digital silence and willful ignorance. I told myself it was the healthiest way for both of us to heal, to build new foundations without constantly looking over our shoulders at the ruins of the old one. It was hard, incredibly hard. The silence was a vacuum, and my mind, hating the void, rushed to fill it with memories. The thing I missed most, the sharpest of all the phantom pains, was playing pool. It was our thing. It started casually, a way to kill time, but it became a language we spoke. I'm a decent player, better than average. I can read the angles, I have a steady hand, and I understand the physics of the spin. But Liam was a magician. On his good days, the cue was a wand in his hand. He could make the balls dance to his will, pulling off trick shots that defied geometry, rail-to-rail banks, delicate kicks, impossibly complex combinations. He was even trying to learn the mass shot, that dramatic curving strike that looks like it belongs in a movie. We both had tables at our respective family homes, but playing in a basement loses its charm. We were young, and the siren song of the outside world was too strong to ignore, so we became connoisseurs of dive bars. Our criteria was simple. The bar had to have a pool table, and it had to be quiet. We despised the raucous, crowded college bars where you had to wait an hour for a table slick with spilled beer, surrounded by screaming patrons. Our sweet spot was the dive bar, the kind of place that attracted an older, quieter crowd. Places with scuffed, uneven tables, sticky floors that clung to your shoes, and the lingering smell of decades of cigarette smoke embedded in the wood paneling. You couldn't expect a pristine regulation table, but the atmosphere was real. We were almost always the youngest people there by a decade or two, but we didn't care. We had outgrown the let's get plastered college mentality. Liam, with his easy charisma, could strike up a conversation with anyone, and our genuine skill at the table earned us a quiet, grudging respect from the old-timers. A few weeks after the split, on a dreary, nothing Wednesday, the craving hit me like a physical blow. I needed to feel the smooth, worn wood of a cue in my hand, the satisfying clack of the break, the quiet focus of lining up a shot. None of my friends were free, and the thought of another night spent sitting on my sofa, feeling sorry for myself, was unbearable. So, I did something I'd never done before. I decided to go out alone. I drove to the Rusty Q, one of our old haunts, telling myself it wasn't about nostalgia. It was about reclaiming a piece of myself that I felt I had lost. It was a lie, of course, but it was a necessary one. The bar was a perfect carbon copy of my memory. The dim lighting from the low-hanging beer signs cast long shadows, the vinyl on the bar stools was cracked and worn, and a dusty jukebox in the corner was playing a mournful country song. The familiarity was a double-edged sword. It was comforting, but it also stung with the fresh venom of memory. I could almost see Liam leaning against the bar, a wry smile on his face. I almost turned and fled right then, but I forced my legs to carry me forward. I ordered a beer, the cold bottle a welcome shock to my system, and then another. After the second drink had warmed my veins and dulled the sharpest edges of my grief, I wandered over to one of the two pool tables. I picked up a cue, its surface warped and scarred, and began idly chalking the tip, the blue dust coating my fingers. I wasn't sure what my plan was. Playing alone felt a little pathetic, but before I could talk myself out of it, my question was answered. A guy walked over, breaking me from my reverie. He was maybe in his mid-20s, the only other person in the room who looked under 40. He leaned against the table with a casual air. "You up for a game?" he asked, his voice friendly. I nodded, grateful for the distraction. "Sure, rack 'em up." He put a few crumpled dollar bills into the slot and started racking the balls. I had to suppress a small laugh. He was racking them wrong, with the one ball at the front instead of in the middle of the third row. A rookie mistake. I didn't say anything. We played a few games and I started to relax. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't Liam. He had power but no finesse. I didn't go easy on him. I needed the clean, uncomplicated satisfaction of winning. I won every single rack we played. We chatted between shots. He bought me a couple of drinks. His name was Mark, and he was friendly enough, but it quickly became apparent that he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. His conversation was a loop of surface-level topics: work, sports, the weather. I preferred guys who were sharp, quick, who could challenge me in a conversation. Mark was not that guy. Still, I didn't mind. It was nice to just play and talk without overthinking, without the weight of shared history pressing down on me. For a little while I was actually having a good time. After the fourth game, which I won with a clean run of the table, he popped the question. "So, you want to get out of here? Go back to my place?" The question caught me off guard, a sudden shift. In the evening's tone, I guess I shouldn't have been shocked, but I was. I froze for a second, the cue in my hand suddenly feeling heavy and awkward. I shook my head, trying to make my rejection playful. "Whoa, slow down there. You'll need at least a second date for that." In truth, I wasn't totally opposed to the idea of moving on, but not with him. Not on a random Wednesday night fueled by cheap beer and nostalgia. I guess my performance wasn't convincing enough. His entire demeanor curdled. The friendly, easygoing smile vanished, replaced by an ugly, tightening scowl. His eyes, which had been benignly vacant, now held a glint of something mean. "Are you serious?" he spat, his voice low and guttural. Before I could process the change, his hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. His grip was shockingly strong. "I spent all that money on your drinks," he snarled, as if the $6 he'd spent constituted a binding contract. He then snatched my purse off the nearby stool. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. My mind went completely blank. I had never been in a situation like this. I was in a public place, but a quiet one. My instinct to scream or fight was smothered by a paralyzing wave of fear. I just froze, a deer in the headlights. Luckily, my paralysis was broken by an outside force. Two of the older men at the bar, grizzled guys who had been nursing their beers in silence, had noticed the sudden escalation. One of them, a large man with a thick gray beard, stood up. "Hey," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Let the lady go." Mark glared at the man, then shot a venomous look back at me. He muttered something vile under his breath, something about me being a tease, and threw my purse back onto the pool table. The contents spilled out my wallet, some makeup, a pen. Then he turned and stormed out of the bar, the door swinging shut behind him with a final, angry thud. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I stammered my thanks to the old men, my voice trembling. They just nodded, their faces grim, and went back to their drinks. The spell was broken. The night was over. I hastily gathered my things, stuffed them back into my purse, and called an Uber. Shaking, I waited outside, the cool night air doing little to calm my frantic nerves. The Uber, it arrived quickly. I slumped into the back seat, the events of the last 10 minutes replaying in a dizzying loop. I closed my eyes, just for a moment, trying to push the image of Mark's furious face out of my mind. I must have been more exhausted, emotionally and physically, than I realized, because the next thing I knew, the Uber driver was gently shaking my shoulder. "Miss, we're here." We were parked across the street from my house. The familiar sight of my front porch should have been comforting, but an undercurrent of anxiety still buzzed beneath my skin. I thanked him, got out of the car, and started walking toward my door, digging through my bag for my keys. As my fingers searched for the cold metal, I impulsively checked my phone for the first time since leaving the bar, and that's when I saw it. The notification that turned my blood to ice. AirTag found moving with you. I nearly dropped my phone. My hand started to shake uncontrollably. My breath hitched in my throat. Frantically, I appended my purse right there, on the sidewalk, the contents scattering across the concrete under the pale glow of the streetlight. Wallet, keys, lipstick, tissues, ... And there, nestled amongst the detritus of my life, was something small, white, and alien. My fingers brushed against a smooth plastic disc. I pulled it out and stared at it in disbelief. An AirTag. A wave of pure, unadulterated panic, far worse than anything I had felt in the bar, crashed over me when he snatched my purse. He hadn't been trying to steal it. He had planted this. I was still standing in the middle of the street, completely exposed. With a guttural sob of fury and fear, I threw the AirTag onto the pavement and stomped on it again and again, grinding it under my heel until I was sure its tiny electronic soul had been crushed into oblivion. I fought back a scream, my breathing coming in ragged, painful gasps. The cold night air wasn't helping. It felt like it was freezing my lungs. I needed to get inside. I looked around frantically, my eyes darting into the shadows between the houses. The street was completely empty, unnervingly quiet, but he would know. Maybe not my exact house number, but the street for sure. My phone would have led him right here. The houses on my street are large and spaced out, with long driveways and deep yards. It wouldn't take him long to figure out which one was mine. I scrambled to pick up my things, grabbed my purse, and sprinted to my back door, my keys jingling madly. My hands fumbled with the lock, my fingers numb and clumsy. Finally, the lock clicked open. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, and shot the deadbolt home. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst through my chest. I was safe, for now, but I couldn't stop shaking. I made my way through the dark house and up to my room, wondering how a simple night out had spiraled into this nightmare. Sleep was an impossible fantasy. I crept to my bedroom window, which overlooked the street, thinking that watching the empty familiar road might calm me. For a few minutes it did. The world outside was still and peaceful. Then, I noticed it. An old beat-up Lincoln, its body rusted and dented, drove slowly past my house. My stomach clenched. It was just a car, I told myself. Nothing unusual. But, at this hour, on this quiet residential road, it felt wrong. Then, a minute later it came back, driving from the opposite direction. I knew. A cold certainty settled in my bones. It was him. He was looking. This time it passed even slower. The driver's head a dark silhouette scanning the houses. I didn't want to face the reality of it. But when it passed for the third time, I had no choice. It had to be him. He was trying to pinpoint my house. I wanted to scream, to call the police, but a paralyzing fear kept me rooted to the spot. What if he saw the lights? What if he saw me on the phone? I know it doesn't make sense, but terror isn't rational. The fourth time the car passed, the driver's side window was rolled halfway down. My breath caught in my throat. I could feel his gaze sweeping over my dark window. Then, instead of continuing down the road, the car's brake lights flared red. It stopped. It just stopped, idling in the middle of the road, directly across from my house. I ducked down instantly, my back pressing against the wall below the window, my heart hammering a million beats a minute. I stayed there, crouched and trembling, too terrified to move, to breathe. Minutes stretched into an eternity. I finally risked a peek. The car was gone. I waited, listening, for what must have been an hour, but it didn't come back. The next morning, exhausted and raw, I told my parents everything. My dad, his face a mask of fury, scolded me for not calling the police immediately. He called a friend of his, a police chief, who told us what I already feared. Without a license plate number or more evidence, there wasn't much they could do. He told us to call 911 the second we saw the car again. I didn't leave the house for days. The world outside my front door felt charged with menace. Every passing car sent a jolt of fear through me, but I never saw the beat-up Lincoln again. Weeks turned into a month, and the sharp terror began to dull into a constant low-grade anxiety. I started to believe, to hope, that the nightmare was over, that he had given up. Last night I was finally starting to feel normal again. I was cleaning up in the kitchen after dinner when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from the Find My app, something I hadn't opened in weeks. My blood ran cold. AirTag detected near you. First seen with you today at 8:15. I had been home all day. With a shaking hand, I tapped the notification and selected the play sound option. And from somewhere deep within the walls of my own home, from the crawl space beneath my feet, I heard a faint, electronic chirp. Never left. He was just waiting.